Yes, it's Sunday again. Sunday live chat.
Here we are.
Yeah, today's very special guest, the wonderful Moe Espinosa, aka Drumcell,
Yeah,
Hypoxia. Did you say, is that how you say it? Hypoxia?
that's correct. You got it.
Or is it Hypox 1A?
Well, no, it's just hypoxia. Just try to throw in the old hacker curve, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Welcome. Are you currently you're in the San Gabriel Valley?
Yeah, I am. I'm very close to Whittier. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but
I'm not actually.
I'm about
Where
20
are you?
I'm about 20 minutes east exactly of downtown LA. So I'm not that far from downtown. But Whittier is like one of the oldest settlements outside of central Los Angeles area. So we have like an old town Whittier, which is I don't know, like an old Quaker settlement, but it's a really cool little neighborhood. It's got a bunch of little tiny record stores all over the place and kind of mom and pop clothing stores and little restaurants, which are all obviously suffering currently right now.
Yeah, really. How would I get there if I was coming from Hollywood? Where was that? It's south of LA, right?
Yeah. So if you're in, no, it's east of LA. So if you're in downtown, you could just jump on this on the 10 east, which turns into the 60, and then you
Okay,
take the 60 freeway all the way like towards Pomona, and then 20 minutes into it, you hit right where the 60 and the 605 meet.
nice. We sound like the Californians.
I know that's funny. Somebody asked me from Germany about that the other day. They were there. If do Californians really say the 10 to the 605 to the 405 to the five? Like, yeah, absolutely, man. We do talk that way.
Oh, it's nice to be calling you the king of Angeleno techno.
Yeah, that term's thrown around quite a bit. Makes me blush a little bit when I hear it.
Put a face to it, you know. I mean, Drumcell and your worldwide exposure lately, and also representing is has been pretty cool. And then it's not like LA kind of like I remember in around '93, Dwayne got exposed to some of the rave stuff that was going on here in LA. And it
Yeah,
was possibly the first like real rave stuff that he had ever seen, and it changed his life.
yeah,
And it was so vibrant that he was stalking Melrose and the stores there. Every like that's where you'd find him. And so I
absolutely.
know how powerful it was. And it's like, did you have that same experience as far as like when you were growing up as being part of being exposed to some of those raves?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, you almost you described my history very well as well. It's funny because I grew up I grew up in a non-electronic music background, so I would say, I grew up. My older brother was like 100% into rock music, and that's all that kind of played here. My sisters were more into like the new wave sound, but I grew up playing guitar and playing in hardcore punk bands and doing the gig thing, and had very little exposure to electronic dance music, so to speak. So I kind of had to pave my own way and figure out my own lines. But I was lucky enough to be introduced to this rave scene in LA by the drummer in my band. He one day we after a gig we were packing up the drum sets and he was like, "Hey man, we're all going to this rave after this gig. You want to go?" And I was like, "Whatever." I didn't really have much interest, but he was like, "Yeah, well, we got some LSD. We're gonna do it out." And I was like, "All right, let's try it. Let's go." And it was like my first time, so I went and in one night it changed my entire life. It completely peeled my skull back and it changed my perspective of music and everything that I had done. And next thing I know, it was my priority. I found myself learning about DJing and producing electronic music and shopping for records on Melrose and going down to Costa Mesa to Dr. Free Clouds, which was like Rondy Core's store, and doing that whole thing.
Did you get classically trained in guitar? You came from a classically trained background?
Yeah, the thing is like I took piano lessons when I was younger. Um, and it was funny because I never learned how to read music.
Hmm.
I had a really good ear for just hearing things and being able to play it back. And I even remember when I had a guitar teacher once, and I remember like 4 months into guitar lessons, he asked me to like, hey, can you play this part, and showed me some sheet music, and I couldn't do it. And he realized that this whole time I was actually pretending like I was reading music and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just playing from my ear, and it blew him away. So then at that point he was just like, oh fuck it, man, let's just jam. And then we would just play together. So I had some lessons and training, so to speak. I don't know if that really equals out to classically trained, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, I went through the ropes, man. I mean, I even was in marching band. I joined the drum line and I played with a drum corps in high school and all that stuff. So,
You know, all these things is like you wonder what you're doing at the time, and then later it all comes into play. It's like, wow, I'm glad I thought about that back then. But then the rave scene comes along, and it just like takes it and it goes like this, and then you know how to implement these possible influences differently. Do
absolutely.
you remember what it was about that rave, or who was performing at that rave, that really made it like go over the top?
Um, who was
The
performing? You know, to be honest with you, it was I do recall. The thing is like it's funny because the LA rave scene back in the days, it wasn't like there was that many huge headliners coming from around the world to play here. It was almost like the local DJs were the headliners. Like a lot of local LA DJs were the big guys playing at the top of the bill for some of the biggest parties. And then every once in a while, of course, you did have people come in from out of town. But at that particular point in my life, and even in that stage of the scene, there was not as much segregation between genres. It was like everybody was kind of into everything. You had like drum and bass and techno and trance and house music and all this kind of playing. And I was just kind of soaking it all in. Um, and I think the first party I went to, I wasn't really paying attention to who was playing, but there was this incredible sense of being at the right place at the right time, almost like you were part of this magically spiritual moment that was happening at that significant time that was never going to happen anywhere else. And I mean, that could have been just me perceiving it that way, but I feel like a lot of my peers who were around at that time agree with me.
Yeah,
And it almost felt like being in Haight Ashbury in the 60s with a bunch of hippies. Like you were just at the right historical place at the right time.
I
And it
would say
was,
so.
yeah, it was awesome.
Wayne,
But I will say this, being that I kind of came from like a punk and really kind of learning about roots of industrial music at that age before I was starting to go to raves, I was definitely more attracted to extreme electronics, things that were noisy and aggressive and fast and abrasive. So I kind of found my home in the rave scene kind of more in the hardcore and gabber scene. And in
wow.
particular, when I started going to parties, there was two DJs that were both from Chicago, DJ Tron and Delta 9, that both is what led me to love techno and extreme electronics music. So that was definitely, as I started to progress and go to more raves and started paying attention to the DJs who were playing, I found myself in that area of parties and following those DJs more than anyone else.
After those parties, Dwayne started wearing a cape, and he had Ren and Stimpy underwear, but he would wear it on the outside of his green pants.
Yeah,
So I
that
was like,
sounds
okay, I
appropriate.
totally get it. Um, it was the band Asen, which just ripped his skull off, and
Oh
which
yeah.
I I don't think they did much more than one album, but
Is that the guys
NRG.
that did the On the Moon or Trip to the Moon?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it just it changed his whole direction and course of life. But such is a good thing, man. The stuff that he made after he heard that was far too progressive for what Ogre wanted, but it was definitely something like, I don't know, it was like something that I hadn't really like. He dented my brain, so I was also very happy about that.
Mhm.
But what was it that took you away from the rock and said, okay, I've got to start learning some of this gear? Um, there was a you I read that you got a job in a studio that was crucial in some of your early training as far as learning some of the key early classical gear, the Roland drum boxes and so on.
Yeah. Um, the thing is I wouldn't say that we were good kids back in the days. We got into a lot of shit, man. We were troublemakers and just kind of just, just street kids, man, just causing ruckus and going to parties. And my parents were terrified because obviously your parents want the best for you growing up, and they were doing everything they could to practically keep me out of jail. And most of my siblings ended up going on to more traditional kind of educational routes and I was kind of the black sheep who just, wanted to be a weirdo. And I think by the time I was 15, I was being encouraged pretty heavily to get a job. And I think that the particular point was not necessarily for financial means, but to just stay out of trouble and doing something after school. And I had a friend of mine, my friend Mike G, who was DJing. And I used to go to his house and kind of like listen to his records. And he was interning at a recording studio, which interestingly enough was this Latin house label called Busta Groove Records.
Nice.
And they did not produce any music that I identified with whatsoever. I mean, they were producing a lot of like the big Latin or Latino house DJs and like this girl, Lena Santiago. I mean, it was definitely more mainstream dance music. But the guy who owned it, his name was DJ Juanito. He just had done that Lena Santiago record, and the record had gone platinum. And I think he saw a lot of potential in us, and he saw a bunch of kids that he could kind of help out and get out of trouble. So we didn't get paid a lot of money to be there, but we got access to the studio every day. And I got to learn a lot of traits that ended up being incredibly useful to me in the future because I was in the back room basically taking catalog of the vinyl records, calling distributors and helping them box up records and send records to distributors. Sometimes we drive around and drop off records on consignment to local record stores. We would sometimes be in the studios, wrap cables, learn how the mixers work. You would teach me how the patch bay would work. And in the back room, you would set me up with a little small Macintosh computer with digital performer on it and kind of, this was like mid 90s, so computers weren't, as not as relevant in making electronic music. But he had a whole bunch of old Roland gear that for him by that point was already kind of old and not relevant to what he was doing musically. And I had just seen this stuff on t-shirts and, sweatshirts from raves or mix CDs on the cover. And I knew that this stuff was what they used to make the music that I was loving at the parties. And he taught me how to use the pattern sequencer and, how to use the gear. And we would cut demos and record them to DAT tapes, and I'd give them to him, and he'd always tell me they were shit, and then nobody would buy that stuff. And I was just like, fuck you, man. We're going to do this shit ourselves. And we did.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take things into your own hand at one point. Is it true that at that studio you had guys like Dr. Octagon and Cool Keith?
Not at that studio. By, when I by the time I had stopped working at Busta Groove Records, this was probably 99. And I had decided that I wanted to go to Musicians Institute to learn recording engineering.
Right on.
And it was like a 6-month program. And when I finished, I just basically went to the billboard and looked for studios that I can intern around in Hollywood. And I ended up getting a job at a studio called Silent Sounds. And I worked at Silent Sound Studio, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years. And at that period, at that studio, I was able to collaborate and work with a ton of incredible musicians. George Clinton and the Parliament guys had come into the studio all the time. I had the pleasure of tracking with them for 2 or 3 months. Cool Keith from the Ultramagnetic MCs, and you're familiar with him. He'd come in the studio and we'd do sessions with him. Marvin Gaye the third. I even found myself in the studio every once in a while with like Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown had come in, and just, amalgamation of different artists had come through that studio, which was great.
What an experience, though. I mean, it's just something about when you witness somebody like that, like, doing their thing, and you don't realize it, but you're learning from every one of these people you're having an interaction with, and somehow it's getting implied into its own thing in Moe's head, where pretty soon these things are going to just, you know, come out into this new form.
Yeah.
So what was Mad 12 then?
Oh wow, man, you really dug deep, didn't you? Mad 12, that was my first record label. Me and the same guy, Mike G, who basically introduced me to that studio, the first studio that I'd worked at. We were cutting demos and making records. And I mean, man, you know, we didn't have the connections to record labels to release our stuff. So we decided to do it on our own. And we literally were like, man, I was probably 17 years old when we started this label. So, you know, we saved up every goddamn penny that we had in our pocket to just release our own records. And I remember we went to, it was Erica Records that pressed the record. And we went there. We were like, we got all this music. We had knew nothing about like cutting masters or anything like that. We want to put this music out. And this is how much money we have. And I remember they told us, they're like, look, that's not enough to press. We only do a minimum of 1,000 records at that time. Nobody did 250 or 500 records. And they basically was like, you know, if you want to press as many records, it's going to how much it's going to cost. We didn't have that much. And they're like, all right, well, look, in the back, we've got a bunch of scrap vinyl, like regrind stuff. And it's a bunch of different colors. And if you don't care what color the records are, we're just going to mix everything down and melt it and just press it. And the records sounded absolutely horrible. And they came out this like really shit brown color because they'd probably mixed scraps from a bunch of different colored vinyls. But we pressed 1,000 of those records, and it was weird. It was a couple instrumental beats that we had done in the studio, and then like a barrage of strange science fiction samples from VHS tapes. We would just literally connect to a sampler from a VHS machine and just record old B sci-fi films. And it kind of got really popular in the hip hop beat scratching juggling kind of community.
That's perfect.
And yeah, we went down to Fat Beats, and we didn't know how the hell we were going to sell 1,000 records. And we basically put 50 on consignment, and next thing you know, in 3 days they called us and said, we want another 100. You know, next thing you know, we're beating on Stop and DMC Records and Street Sounds.
Yeah, DMC, Dwayne's Paradise.
Yeah, we went to all those shops, man, and we sold them all. We sold 1,000 records, and
wow.
Yeah, next thing I know, years later, I'd run into DJ Qbert. He was like, man, you were behind that Mad 12 record. Those records were insane. And we didn't really know what we were doing, but it seemed like we just kind of hit the right note at the right time.
I'd really like to hear it. I mean, is it on YouTube or?
No, it's pretty.
It's one of those obscure things.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think I have one somewhere around here.
Might have to borrow it off you.
Yeah, I might have to rip it, but it's so funny because on the B side, we put a picture of Pancho Villa, and we gave them a square JPEG image, and they didn't even stretch it out enough to go over the full circle. So it's like a square white label. It's a white label with a square image in the middle of it. And it's super ghetto, but whatever, man. That's what we had at the time.
But I guess this, you know, you were already working on self-distribution and distribution of things. So all along the way, this power of self-distribution becomes very much crucial in the development of how, I guess, you would go on to then take products out of when you traveled to Detroit for the first time,
yeah,
and promoted yourself. I don't know if I'm jumping far ahead here. I know that you had been said that working in the studio was a great time, but 9/11 basically ended that.
Absolutely. The whole DIY thing has kind of been the theme through my entire career. I've not until recently did I ever actually sign an album or do a record on another label. I never really waited around for anyone to release my music. I've definitely sent my stuff to a few people, but it was never a priority. I ended up basically saying, if I'm going to put out records, I'm going to put it out myself. If I'm going to distribute a record, I'm going to sell it myself. If I'm going to play shows, I'm going to throw the show myself. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do this and do it all by myself. And I don't know if that's a control thing, but it certainly was more of an impatient thing of not having to wait around to do things. I just wanted to do it, and it kind of just worked out and for into my own favor. I was working in recording studios, and yeah, when 9/11 happened, it's I don't even know if I would blame it completely on 9/11, but I would definitely say that that was an interesting period because that's when computers really started getting to the point where people were finally kind of establishing their own home studios. Like the Digi 001 from Pro Tools had come out, and like everybody had a what were those G4 towers or G3 Max, and
Yeah.
installing Pro Tools and having a studio thing. So renting out studio spaces to do stuff was becoming less and less common. Clientels were getting less, so more established engineers that have been around for a long time and mixing, producing bands were trying to hog up whatever was work was left. And I just basically decided that being a studio engineer and tracking wasn't necessarily my lifelong goal. I wanted to go ahead and proceed and do my own music. So yeah, we started our record label Droid. That's where Droid started, and trying to establish some sort of a techno scene in LA. And like you said, it was a matter of pressing our first record and flying over to Detroit and handing them out to as many people as we could to actually get the label off its feet.
And you also formed the Droid Behavior Group. This is like becoming like a sort of focal point for a show or a theme, a like-minded theme
Yeah.
that you've been working with your partners.
Yeah.
Uh, this has been something that I think it's like crucial that someone has to take the reins in their city and be the one to say, okay, I'm going to form the production company. I've got a label, and now I'm going to be the guy that does it all too. So you're zeroing in on honing in this whole direction that you're headed. And
Yeah. Yeah. I It was quite an undertaking. The thing about Droid in general was it was a grassroots movement for us more than it was starting a record label and doing everything. It was kind of an educational platform, a promotional group platform, an event group. Basically, towards the end of the 90s, around 99, especially like with who's in office now, Joe Biden starting the anti-rave laws and shutting down parties with these kind of crack house laws, the rave scene in LA came to a stop. The underground scene had completely been demolished, and what was left of it was picked up by the mainstream festivals, which was kind of the birth and start of the kind of EDM world, where everything was going towards these huge EDC festivals in Vegas and stuff, because illegal parties and underground raves in LA were far too risky on a legal end to do things. And we were the kind of people who kind of um, we found comfort in the shadows. We the rave era of big baggy pants and shiny lights and it just wasn't our flavor anymore. I think it was just a matter of I don't know, uh, growing up and kind of moving into a new realm. And LA had never really had a techno scene, and what I mean by that is like a purist kind of form of what Detroit or even Berlin would perceive to be techno. It was always very trancy, rave, drum and bass kind of a scene. Not something that necessarily would represent what was going on in the Midwest between Chicago and like what the Drop Bass Network guys were doing in Milwaukee, and Jeff Mills and Richie Houghton and them were doing in Detroit. And we wanted that here in our city because that was the music that ultimately we loved. And we set up Droid and their newsletters to one, promote this kind of music to as many people as we want. For instance, we started these little business cards that basically said eat sleep shit techno, and every time we would go to a party and we run into someone who said that they were into techno, and this is pre social media, by the way. We would give them a card and be like, dude, get on our newsletter. And we'd start this newsletter we would ship out once a week, and we would do like a secret fun link and a DJ mix. And this was pre podcast. So we would host a DJ mix on our server and promote different DJs and techno DJs, and anyone in the city who was doing even the smallest little techno party, we would promote it because we were trying to build a community to kind of come together to start, some sort of spark of a techno scene in the city. So that naturally grew into us throwing our own events and starting a record label and finding techno producers in the city and signing them to the label and putting out their music. And instead of starting a label and signing European artists who were doing techno, we didn't want to bring sand to the beach. We wanted to export what was going on here in California and with our LA community. So that was kind of the roots of why we started Droid. And the warehouse parties on its own ended up becoming, I guess, legendary in the eyes of many people. And the scene started, our parties grew from, 50 people to next thing you know, we're throwing massive, huge underground warehouse parties with insane visual installations. So, it's been quite the journey.
Who's the visual guy? Octaform?
Yeah.
Got to give props.
It was funny. The thing about the interface warehouse parties that we did is when I started doing warehouse parties, I didn't want to just do something where we just ran in and kind of set up some speakers, and I wanted to create some sort of environment, some kind of completely immersive experience for people, instead of just having a warehouse for the sake of it being illegal, but having a warehouse that was kind of a blank canvas to create this entire experience for people. And I had this like memories. I remember Disneyland back in the days, they had this ride called the People Mover, which is shut down now.
Right, I remember.
You remember that? And you would go into the world of Tron, where they had these two screens with projectors and you were in the light cycle scene and all these people, and kind of thinking to myself, like, fuck, man, how great would it be to actually have a party in a room where you're completely immersed in visuals and this. So that's what was kind of our goal. And the visual element of the party became so incredibly important, and Octaform became such a big part of our show because I wanted people to walk into a different world when they came into this warehouse, and kind of using the whole smoke and mirrors techniques of all of my favorite bands and anyone who played a concert and created an environment that completely took you somewhere else. I mean, you guys come to mind as a huge inspiration on that as well. Back in the days, watching old Skinny Puppy live DVDs and just the way that the performance transformed the entire stage into another world played a huge role into what we wanted to do with our shows as well.
Did you have like an end goal, or have you reached it? Do you feel that you've reached it, or is it more to come that's gonna hit the spot?
Well, I will say I had an end goal, and we did reach it at one point. And I didn't know if I could think of anything new until recently. We kind of sat down and started brainstorming, and all these new kind of concepts started coming up. We basically we really wanted to do a full 360-degree visual installation where it went around the entire room.
Nice.
And with a massive sound system and doing multi-layered visuals, like, using like scrims and doing kind of like multi-layered transparency visual stuff. And we ended up teaming up with a group of guys in Amsterdam named Reactor during the ADE festival. And we rented out this film studio in Amsterdam that they actually use for film production. And we basically made our dreams come true at that show. We had an unlimited budget because we got some sponsorship by some local Dutch promoters, and we put together something incredible, which is still talked about. I can't even do a show these days without someone in Europe coming up to me and be like, oh my God, dude, I was at, ADE Interface 44 and you guys fucking changed my life. And after that, I was like, holy, I don't know what the hell we're going to do next. But we
Amsterdam
started.
gets so behind the production value and stuff.
Absolutely.
I wish I could have seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're so incredibly organized as well. The whole team that put everything together. When Dutch people do things, even their festivals, it's like spot on to the point. So yeah, COVID got in the way, but
Yeah.
we do have a lot more that we want to do and show people and kind of take it up to the next level.
How much did like Detroit influence you once you finally started playing in Detroit and getting the exposure from the DJ spinning your material? And did was it something that you felt like you were accepted right away, or did it take you a while to get a feeling of acceptance from the Detroit scene, or was it work?
Oh yeah, it would work without a doubt. The outsider kids
To pay your dues?
from sunny California wasn't really
Yeah.
cutting through on the rust belt of Detroit and keeping it real out there, man. It was
But then you end
definitely,
up on the main stage, so I guess that's like,
yeah. I mean, it's been 20 years since I've been kind of going back and forth in Detroit. But the thing is it was about 97, 1996 or 97, when Richie Hawtin's Plastic Man albums had kind of fell on my plate, and I discovered Detroit techno with Underground Resistance and Jeff Mills and
yeah,
Auxiliary 88, the kind of electro sound and the whole kind of spin that Detroit put on techno with the science fiction kind of background. Even like Drexia doing the kind of electro, under ocean sci-fi kind of vibe and all that stuff. And it really it inspired me because it touched me on my roots of what I love with science fiction films and B movies and kind of the whole, the whole kind of grindhouse background that I have with films and everything like that. And it that totally inspired me. And just reading all my books on the history of Detroit techno, I always wanted to go out there. And it was in the year 2001 when they did their very first Detroit Electronic Music Festival. And I think that was the first time I had ever been on an airplane alone, like without my, family with me or whatever, going on a family vacation or something. But I was like, fuck this, man. We're going to save up some cash and buy an airplane and fly out there. And obviously now 20 years later, that festival's notorious. I mean, it's
yeah.
one of the most sought after techno festivals in the United States, without a doubt. And I broken in there with my first records, and I remember handing things out, and nobody could ever believe that techno was coming from California. There because there's just this like, projected image, this Hollywood image, the glamour and glitz of Hollywood, and it's so not techno. It's so not
At
this.
that time, definitely not.
Yeah, it's not that underground Rust Belt kind of vibe that
Oh,
they think we're all on the beach, and it's kind of, it doesn't fit the vibe. So people are like, what the fuck? And all right. And then
yeah.
they listen and they're like, oh shit. I mean, that's pretty good. All right. All right. But I linked up just by persistence. And next thing you know, I got a shot playing at the festival one year and played in a small room. And I don't know, man. Every single year since that very first year, I never went back. I haven't missed a festival until this year of COVID. This is the first time I haven't been to Detroit on Memorial Day weekend. And next thing I know, I'm getting booked on the main stage and playing and headlining, the underground stages at the festival, and it's very much a pinch me moment every single time I go through it.
What's the sound systems like out in Detroit? Do they outdo the LA sound systems that you've been able to prepare for droid behavior?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the sound systems that we use in LA, it's funny because a lot of the sound guys out here they're quite polished, like
Yeah.
we use Funkworks for our parties, and then they've bought a full blown Function One sound system with, the bells and whistles. But what I always experience about the Midwest that I love, and it's kind of built into the cultural roots of rave in the Midwest, is there are always these DIY sound systems that are like pulled together from multiple companies, and they build these huge fucking walls, and they're super anal about it sounding good. So yeah, it's good, but it's from a different standpoint. It's almost from like this kind of kit DIY dudes who are like soldering speakers in the back before a party starts than it is out here in LA where you've got someone who's built um, a pre-built sound system, delivered from a factory, but really knows how to run it well. If that makes any sense, I don't know if I'm describing that right.
Oh no, it um, the sound systems that sometimes these guys put together that they're just super purists into knowing what they want are often tuned just so right that when you hear it, you're like, oh shit, I get it. It's like one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Congratulations, Mo. You've been really successful on like traveling the world and doing like just every time I look at you, you're playing most interesting venues in the most interesting countries, like from Portugal to India. What's it like to play in India?
Um, it's incredible. The thing is my booking agent, and if she was listening to this, which I'm sure she's not, but if she was, she would be incredibly frustrated because I get a lot of offers from the same touring routes that most techno DJs get. I mean, you could stay within Europe and make, a good income just playing shows on the same circuit every other DJ plays. But I don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to play the weirdest and most obscure places. So every time she would hit me up and be like, "Oh man, this guy was throwing a party in the middle of the rainforest not far from the Amazon and he wants to book you. Money is shit, but if you want to do it, it's there." I'm like, "Dude, I'm there. I want to do it. That's the gig I want to play." I don't want to have to play the biggest, most famous club in Italy. I'd rather be playing in a shithole in the middle of, I don't know, in Paraguay or something like that. So I've always purposely kind of accepted the weirdest gig offers that I've could. And sometimes they've worked out to be in my benefit and sometimes they haven't, obviously, because, you know how it is on the road. And
Well, actually, you go further than most people. I mean, sometimes I'll see on your Facebook feed, you'd be like, one day you'll be here, and the next day you'll be in Colombia. And you're like, what? Is he really in Colombia? Oh, he's there.
yeah.
Like that's got to be like. I mean, you don't know what you're going into. I can imagine some of these times, and when you get there, it's just full
Yeah,
trust of the
for the most
situation.
part.
Does it always work out okay, or is there sometimes where it's been by the seat of your pants?
There's been some nightmare situations, dude. I've got some fucking stories, and I've definitely put myself in some weird places. But I mean, the bookers and they do a good job of making sure that everything is well taken care of before I get there, and confirmation from at least a decent hotel that I'm not sleeping on a shit floor or anything like that. But for the
What's the
most part,
biggest surprise?
uh,
What place was your biggest surprise? You got there and you're like maybe not expecting it, but it turns out to be like, oh my God, this is like unbelievable.
so I got a request to play at a music festival called Sun Jam Festival. And they told me it was in the middle of the Caribbean Ocean off the coast of Honduras. And I thought about it and I was like, my stepmom is from Honduras and she had always invited me to go visit her family there. So I kind of was like, maybe this is an opportunity for me to go there. So I flew to Tegucigalpa and visited my stepmom's family, who I'm not really close to, but it was a nice experience. And then I flew to San Jose and they told me when you get to San Jose, I don't know, the promoters are being kind of weird. They said that they're going to give you some pocket money and you need to walk around and find a pilot to take you where you want to go. And that didn't make any fucking sense to me. I was like, what? I have to find a pilot? What? They're like, I don't know. They're asking us to just trust them that it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. And I rolled the dice on this, man. I was like, all right, let's do it. And I flew to San Jose. And when I got there, it was really interesting because I came out of the airport and finding a pilot was easier than finding a taxi cab driver. There was pilots everywhere sitting in this lounge and like soliciting workers. And I found one guy and I told him, I'm going to this island. And he's like, yeah, no problem. So he walks me out to the runway and we literally get into a Cessna. And I meet another guy who's like, hey, can I split the fare with you? Because I'm going to the same festival. It's like, all right. So we get into this small Cessna that looked like it was duct taped together, but whatever. And we ended up flying to a tiny island right off the coast of Honduras. And I land there, and a guy in a golf cart picks me up and says, "Let me take you to your cabin." He takes me to this cabin. We get in the cabin. He says, "All right, get your bags. We're going to go down to the docks." We go to the dock, and we get in like what is a size of a motorized canoe boat, like you'd find in Thailand or something. And we took this boat out 2 hours to a tiny remote island that has no electricity, no plumbing, just literally a deserted island in the middle of the ocean where there was a huge festival there. And we stayed 3 days on the island and left all my clothes back in the cabin on the other island, and had probably the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. It was fucking
Wow.
awesome, man. It
What
was,
an experience.
yeah.
That's
Apparently,
kind of sounds like it kind of sounds like the Fire Fest, but went well.
well, this festival's been going on for 20 years or something like that, and
Oh
it
wow.
started because outside of Honduras, it's the second biggest barrier reef outside of Australia.
Wow.
So there's a lot of universities there that teach diving for marine biologists. So people who can't afford to go to university for whatever these particular careers are, if they can't afford to do it in Australia, they always end up in Honduras and studying there. So you find a ton of Westerners and British people and
Right.
from all over the world living on this tiny island, going to university there. And this is basically a big college party that they do once a year on this tiny island. But they basically have these old like World War II boats that would just drive up on the shore. The doors would fall down like on the beaches of Normandy, and all these ravers would just pour out onto the beach,
No
and
way.
they would just have this huge festival there. And that was
Wow.
an incredible experience. But yeah, I mean, India was fascinating. Absolutely. I mean, I know they've always had a rich culture of electronic music with the Goa trance thing in the early 90s, but
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised by how well educated the crowd was on the kind of music that I did and modern electronic music, and how incredibly hungry they were, because a lot of people don't want to take gigs in India. So they don't
Yeah.
get a lot of headliners from out of town. So they were just genuinely really excited. So I've done 3 tours there and have played multiple cities in India. And every time I go there, it's by far probably some of the best gigs I've ever played.
Wow, man. I'll go as your roadie next time. Maybe I can even plug in your cables.
Come on, man. You
Oh
gotta
yeah,
do the
seriously.
Kevin Key tour in India, man.
I've also seen some of your pictures of the food you eat, and it's like mouth watering goodness. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we get to live vicariously through some of your photos. So when you're traveling in a place like this, like what type of setup are you traveling with that makes it all right and safe? Do you play it safe, or do you take a I know you were saying you like tractor and like to run that what with Ableton and like a live drum machine.
I have different setups for different aliases. So with the
Okay.
Drumcell setup, which is most of my touring is done with Drumcell, it's basically I use like a 6-channel Allen and Heath mixer with a couple effects processors set up on the auxiliary sends and returns, mostly like a big sky reverb or something like that. But I use Tractor on 4 decks basically to just use multiple loops from different stems and kind of create things on the fly as I'm playing. And on Ableton, I also have a bunch of loops in my clip launching that I kind of launch, and I'll play with one small external hardware synth. I don't know, like something stupid like this, like a Pioneer AS1 or
Right.
any small groove box that I have to just kind of add stuff on top of it. And I keep that setup pretty minimal. On my rider, I just have the mixer provided by the promoters, and all I basically bring is my sound card, my cables, and my laptop, and my hardware synth. So it's traveling light for the most part. When I do,
That's great. Great setup though. Do you run your sync from Tractor to Slave Ableton?
yeah, I do both on the sound. I used to use 2 computers back in the days. I mean, back in the days, I mean like 6 or 7 years ago. But recently, I've been able to run it all on one machine. So I do a virtual MIDI lock between Ableton and Tractor on one computer.
I was amazed at the sync capabilities. of Traktor's output for clock to external devices. I thought like, oh, this isn't going to work, but it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's
And you
pretty
can make the
solid.
adjustments too, which was kind of cool.
I think I saw a video of you playing at Further. Were you using Tractor at that gig as well?
I had the exact same setup you had, only I used
Okay.
I use also like Traktor as like a loop player, but
Yeah.
as well as my main track, and then I'll have an external synth, and then I have like the CDJ 900 for their effects,
Oh
which
yeah.
I love their effects more than the Traktor effects.
Yeah.
So oh, actually use them both. But oh, by the way, yeah, that even further sound system. Have you ever played that?
Yeah, I did. I played the year before you played.
Did they have that wall?
That's
Was
incredible.
it? It's just I can't believe it. You drop your first song and it's like shit.
Yeah.
Like you get like some. Well, I don't think I've ever played a system that big.
Yeah, that one's quite special. I think what Kurt and the drop bass guys doing around that's a very special gig to play.
Isn't it? I mean, what's amazing is that it's out in the midst of Wisconsin, in the middle of like nowhere,
Yeah.
and then these guys, as you say, they have their pirate sound system set up all over the place. And I had the golf cart too. So you're driving past and you're like here, oh wow, it's like heavy duty concentration, and then on to the next phase, and it's like this other crew. I was pretty impressed. I was. I didn't expect that and had so much fun. Went out there with Basic.
Yeah, that was a good time. Basic actually was there the year I played as well. I ran into him. Um, that was a lot of fun, man. The funny thing is when I was living in California in the '90s and they were doing those even further parties out in Wisconsin, we used to see the flyers for those and just kind of drool about like, oh my God, man, I would love to go to a drop bass party, but it might as well have been at the end of the world back then. You know what I mean? Traveling that
It's
far was,
it's a long journey.
yeah, absolutely. So,
Not
uh,
as long as India.
yeah, of course. But when Kurt hit me up when they were bringing it back, and he was like, "Hey, I'd love you to play the drop bass party," I was completely just like, "Wow, man! I'd love to do it." It was a huge pleasure. So that was awesome to see you on that lineup as well.
The Berghain venue in Berlin, you've also become kind of renowned in, and that's like a kind of like, isn't that the techno center of the world?
Yeah, it is. It is by far one of the most incredible spaces I think I've ever walked into in modern day electronic music today. It is definitely the mecca, I would say, of techno. And I think even on the global scale, it's voted up there as one of the top clubs in the world. Yeah.
It must be just a joy to set up there and hear your
Yeah.
hear your stuff.
Talk about a sound system. I mean, holy shit, dude.
What
That
is it?
room, it's a function one sound system.
Functional.
I mean, have you ever been to the club or you've
I have not. No.
have you heard much about it?
Oh yeah, of course. Seen, heard, and wish that I could be there, but so far have not been able to venture.
We got to change that. We
Yeah,
got to
I would
hopefully
like that.
when this is over, we're going to change that. But yeah, it's it's a huge old electrical factory from World War II era, and it's just a massive dungeon and just a labyrinth of halls and hallways and spaces and secret rooms and dark rooms, and it's the space itself lends to the mystique of the whole experience being there in the first place. And then, of course, how what people claim to be how incredibly difficult it is to get into the club. When you get in there, there's a sense of gratitude for being able to get in, or luck, I would have to say. But the sound system is tuned so incredibly well. I remember the first time I played there, somebody had told me like, "Hey, you got to be careful with the sound system because like even turning an EQ knob on the slightest bit, you can just feel the whole room just kind of expand. It's like driving a Porsche. You just got to be really easy on the gas, you know." So
Wow, man.
the music is completely soaks you in. The club has no mirrors, there's no windows. It opens Friday and closes Monday, so you're like a complete vampire being in there. You never know what time of the day it is. It's always dark, whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or
Does it
not.
just stay open the whole weekend without closing?
Yeah, they just don't close. And the club is
Wow.
packed the whole time. And there's just different waves of people that kind of come in and kind of go out. And you get the morning crowd. A lot of people will tell you things like, oh, locals are there usually on Sundays and the tourists come in on Saturdays. I don't know if any of that's really fucking true, but there's a good vibe throughout the whole night. And basically, I've been blessed to play most of the closing, well, not most, but a handful of closing slots at the club, which is probably one of the most prestigious time slots to play. And as a closing DJ, you usually play a minimum of 10 to 12 hours. So you'll come in about maybe midnight on Sunday night, and you'll play till Monday at about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday afternoon. And
So,
to get that slot is incredibly of a prestigious slot because a lot of people come out on those Monday closing sets. It's like kind of the really, really special situation. And people will stay there until the lights come on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. So within 12 hours, I mean, the range of places you can go musically and the dynamics you have to play with the space is it's quite a truly cathartic and special experience to be able to play there.
12 hours?
Yeah.
Wow. So were you improvising or were you just like able to just like stretch out a piece like for 16 minutes or what was your concept to
Well, the
play for
thing, I mean,
12
it's you're
episodes?
not playing when I'm doing that. I'm not playing all live. I'm DJing as well, so I'm
Yeah.
also selecting music from other people. There's no
Okay.
way that you could not improvise that kind of situation. If you
Sure.
prepare for a gig like that, you're setting up to fail because
Yeah.
the room and the dynamics and the people change over such a period of time that you almost have to drive and steer the room in the right ways. When you've been banging it for so long, there is a feeling of exhaustion and tiring. And then you go down to these deeper spaces of weird experimental electronic music that would mostly bore people in other spaces. But there's something about that club and that sound system and the people that go to Berghain where there's an incredibly large amount of patience where they just stick with you no matter how weird and awkward of areas you're going into. So you really get to kind of experiment with an incredibly diverse range of music over a period of time.
Is there any other places in the world that come to mind that are on that level, or is that the like really the crowning jewel?
The only other place that has come close to that for me was in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Oh,
There's a
wow.
festival there called Gamma Festival. It's not like a music festival that happens once a year, but it's something they do multiple times out throughout the year. And it's a huge old industrial factory from the Cold War where they used to make rubber boots for the soldiers. And that space and the sound system and they curate a bunch of like light visual systems and experimental artists to come and play music. That is the only thing that I've ever experienced that have come close to Berghain.
Isn't it funny how like music transcends boundaries so much better than people and politics? It's just like kind of like it's like a
Absolutely.
universal language of music has like an open arm around the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's it
have you had a
appeals.
chance? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it totally just it's an experience that you can't get with anything else.
Have you had a chance to play in Japan? I think I saw that you were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think those are the gigs that I look forward to more than anything.
Yeah, man. Tell
I've
me
always
about it.
I've always told myself that if my music career comes to an end, if I can just hold on long enough to get one gig in Tokyo a year and one gig at Berghain a year, I'll be happy for the rest of my life. That's all I really want to
Exactly.
get.
Exactly.
Japan is my favorite place in the world, and it's
Wow.
It's the only thing that I look forward to like all year round to just completely. And when I go there, I'm so yeah, I got one gig, but I'm going to stay for 3 weeks. You know.
Yeah, man, that's you. You and I think the same then, because I pick it as the number one place in the world too, and
Yeah.
nothing makes you feel as good as going there. And no matter what the show is, it always turns out to be something that's like memorable that you just can't like soon forget.
It's
Yeah,
everything about it's just the city, it's the vibe, it's the food, it's I don't I maybe it's just like the pop culture references that I have in my history and growing up, and it's my Disneyland. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
me too.
Tokyo is my place. That's where I want to go. Even through this entire pandemic, every time I go through my phone and I see pictures of Tokyo, I just like, oh fuck, man, I miss Japan so much, dude.
Me too. We actually, I had a gig book there March 28th, and we were watching the COVID, thing through February. It was like, there was like 700 people on that ship that had it, and there was maybe 15 people in America that had it, and we are like, your flight has been canceled, and I'm like, oh shit. So we tried to figure out ways to get there still, and then inevitably it got canceled.
Yeah.
But I saw that you were still out on the road, and you were coming in, and I was like worried that I think you were in a hot zone,
Yeah.
and then when you came in, your family made you go in quarantine for a little bit there,
Yeah.
playing it really safe. That's really honorable of you though, to
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
at
You
that
know,
time
the
it
thing
was right at
is
the beginning too.
it was right at the beginning. I mean, I had a few gigs booked in Amsterdam and Germany and another I think it was in Russia. I can't remember, but we had just played Berghain and it was already kind of bubbling up in the news that this was happening and people were talking about it. But it was kind of like, is this something you take serious right now, or is this kind of like just going to fade away? It was really hard to grasp the reality of it all and where it was going. And I was in Germany. We were working on the beginning of our next Belief Defect record, and I was in between gigs during the week when we were working on the record. And then I remember my sister had texted me, and Trump had just said like, "Oh, we're shutting down the borders.
Oh yeah, that was scary.
Yeah, Americans have less than 3 days to get home." And I was like,
Oh
"Oh
great.
fuck! All right, we're going home." So I called Delta Airlines and I booked a flight like the next day right away. And when I flew back, I mean, I have since me and my wife had a kid, we've had my mother around to help us, and she's in her early 80s. And I know that we already had heard that elderly people were definitely the more subjected to being high risk. So when I got home, it was kind of my sister and me, my wife and I just spoke about it and was like, look, just go check in at the Holiday Inn down the street from the house and just stay there for a couple weeks before you come home just to be safe. Because there was no tests available. There was nothing. So that 2 weeks sucked though. That's for sure.
Look, I felt bad for you. It looked like you were, it looked like you needed to come home and you were like stuck in a hotel room or something. I was like, oh man, it felt for you.
Well, it's shitty being in a hotel a few blocks from your house and you haven't been home
Yeah.
in like weeks. You know what I
And
mean?
the hotel rooms all look the same. It's like,
And my son is like calling me like, Papa, when you coming home? And I'm like, I don't want to tell him like, yeah, I'm down the street. I'm like, I'm almost done with work. I'll be home soon. So yeah, what an
so
interesting experience.
so Drumcell is like kind of like the beat friendly, like more beat world, and Hypoxia is more as you kind of said, is more like I want to lay it down in one take
Yeah.
mode. Is that and more of a sci-fi cinematic
Yeah.
sound? Is that sort of like the concept for Hypoxia, is to sort of like dark, more like what do they call it? Dark ambient.
Yeah. I mean, the drum cell stuff has always been kind of a mixture of broken beat, industrial inspired music and techno and kind of DJ friendly dance floor music, kind of where those worlds meet together. And the Hypoxia project is kind of more of my modular thing. And it's always been a way for me to take a piece of gear outside of my studio into a different isolated space and minimize a setup and kind of just exploit the limitations within one instrument and it ends up being more ambient because of the fact that I don't ever pick a drum machine and like my modular synth. I will just have like a modular synth and write a patch, and because I don't have a drum machine, it just by definition, I guess, becomes ambient. But definitely the music that I write on my modular systems is inspired by like early science fiction films and movies. I mean, like, you know, the whole kind of Vangelis and John Carpenter and Wendy Carlos sound, and, you know, and that kind of thing, with a little bit more of like a modern ambient kind of Abdul Mogard kind of vibe to it. So yeah, it's just kind of like inspired by old film, cinematic movie stuff, and because of the nature of how I make the music is kind of what makes it ambient.
You also do a belief defect as well.
Yeah.
Is that the third project? And between those, on Bandcamp backslash Drumcell, I believe that is the location. What you can pick up, like what looks to be like 5 EPs, 2 LPs. You've worked with Surachai on the project Sentence.
Yeah.
That is all available there for people to get. The NAMM after parties, you guys have been kind of known as part of the Trash Audio group and the Black Noise. You were inducted into this group. You were kidnapped into this group by the other fellas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that after party has become also quite a regular occurrence.
Yeah. It's funny, the whole kind of NAMM after party thing started back in the early 2000s with my buddy Derek Michael. I don't know if you know him, but I know he's really good friends with Basic and them. And it was a lot more of a light footed kind of take on of a gear friendly kind of, you know, MIDI controllers and different synthesizers. And we'd hit up companies like Native Instruments to kind of sponsor things and set up little booths. And then we'd ask a bunch of people to come and do performances on various different gears. And Derek Michael kind of originally had taken the reign of kind of curating that. And I was, because Droid was so relevant in promoting and doing events, and Derek wasn't much of an event promoter, I kind of was the one who took on more of the business aspect of it and kind of putting together the production and all that stuff like that. And over the years, Derek Michael kind of spinned off and started doing his own thing. And he used to call his gatherings Wham Bam Thank You Nam, which was a funny little title for it. But since he was no longer kind of involved, me and Surachai were kind of interested in keeping the tradition going, but curating the music a little bit more to our taste and kind of putting our own kind of spin and style on it. So we changed the name, obviously, and we continued it called Black Noise, and kind of changed the whole environment, the look of the flyer and the whole idea and the concept. But at the end of the day, it was still a continuation of what Derek was doing in the early 2000s. And we kind of use the same production team. So there's, regardless of different names and different looks, that there's still kind of a history that combines two of those periods kind of together. And yeah, I mean, we started doing shows and booking all of our favorite artists and having everybody come down and play. I know that, you know, Cyrus has come down and performed for us. Surachai, Richard Devine's always been playing for us, and having tons of people that we just admire musically that are doing really interesting things, which kind of led to us feeling like we wanted to start a record label around it as well. So
yeah, it's always probably one of the better parts of the NAMM show, to be quite honest. You know, those of us that don't want to catch the NAMM flu go to the NAMM party and avoid the NAMM flu.
Yeah. We got to have a Kevin Key set soon.
What's that?
We got to get a Kevin Key set at a Black Noise party.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm saying I live in LA. Just call, let me know anytime. I would love to. I mean, I always thought that Plateau, I did a project with my partner Phil Western called Plateau, which was very much inspired by Maurizio and by Basic Channel and, you know, some of the earlier techno stuff. Was one of my favorite projects to work on because of the concept of less is more, and just sort of like as you were saying, uh, working with a tweaky little setup. Hey, simmer. But anytime, man, anytime. As you were saying, you've got a record label that's associated with Black Noise, and also your label. What is the new projects you're working on now?
Well, I'm still right now. I would say that the primary majority of my time is spent on producing the next Belief Defect record. Um,
Nice.
the Drumcell stuff has kind of taken a back seat in the last couple years. Just didn't really feel like I've had much to say under that alias, and I've just decided that I'm just gonna lay it down until I find the inspiration to kind of work on a new Drumcell album. And I mean, with the Hypoxia stuff, it's a fun thing, but it's got its limitations, and you can only go so far. But with Belief Defect, it's me and my partner Luis Flores, and that is primarily where I would say 90% of my focus in my music production is kind of going into right now, is trying to finish this new album. We did our first album on Raster Noten. I don't know if you're familiar with the label, which is a infamous kind of IDM experimental label, and they've kind of taken the risk with us on this project. And we toured with the group last year pretty heavily, and I think musically that's where I'm kind of inspired by the most, and I kind of feel like I'm trying to pour the majority of our efforts into. So we're trying to finish this second album, and obviously we'll give Raster first pick on it if they pick it up. If not, then we always have our own Black Noise label to release it on. So
Right on. So have you felt pretty inspired during this COVID thing, or has it zapped you a bit?
um I to be frankly transparent and honest with you, I think this whole COVID thing has put me in an incredibly manic depressive state. It's
Oh
been
man,
it's been difficult to keep myself above water with this, you know.
it's a sad state of things that I would say about 90% of the creative people I know have been suffering from some uh, creative trauma or another form of trauma this year that has been front seat in some of the things. But man, the best thing to do is to like get on the phone and talk to each other and communicate and inspire each other to do some stuff. And now, last few days, I've been finding, well, not a few days, a couple weeks. You always can tell when you're feeling a little better when you start to like look at gear again.
Yeah.
It's like, there's be a little while where you just can't even look at your equipment, and you'd be like, well, my mind is just elsewhere at this moment. And so I find that when I look at a piece of equipment again, I'll be like, oh, good, oh, good. And I'll be like, I'll just try and draw myself in. But
Yeah, that little boost of inspiration that new piece of gear can give you.
I've got a new cheap piece of gear right over there. I don't know if you can see it.
No, I can't.
I'll buy something like cheap. It's like the Yamaha MS1 sampler. It's like a $350 keyboard sampler.
Oh,
And it's
interesting.
like so tweaky. You can do like what you were doing like with the Mad 12. It was like just like take some horrible samples and really low quality and just like spin together a beat and be like, and sometimes that's kind of like what I need to clear out my system.
Absolutely.
So I see you got a beautiful setup there. What's your favorite thing in the room? You love the Buchla music easel, don't you? That was a Hypoxia special.
Yeah, I use that quite a bit on quite a few records. It's been a fun piece. I'll be honest with you, I haven't touched it in a while. But I have some gear down here by my sides on these racks that you can't really see well with the camera. But I've been playing a lot with this Black Corporation Kajimi. That thing has been incredibly inspiring.
The Black Corporation, is it the what is it the single voice of the CS80?
No, not the CS80 one. The Kajimi synthesizer, the Kajimi with the modulation matrix. It's got a bunch of buttons. It's
Oh,
kind of
I didn't. I've never looked at it.
yeah. I don't know, man. I don't think you could really see it here, but
That's
it's
Roman, right? Roman's.
yeah, Roman synth. It's blown me away. They just even came out because I'm a big DAW user. I produce everything on a computer at the end of the day. So they just came out with this Babu Frick software editor for it, which is just blown up. It's just
What?
opened up a world of possibilities for me on this synthesizer, and I've been creating
Wow.
such just absolutely insane sounds.
Black
So
Corporation, and what was the name of the synth again?
Kajimi,
Kajimi.
that's the
And
name
there's
of
a
the synth.
a remote editor.
Yeah, apparently, what's his name? J.J. Abrams named a planet in Star Wars after this synthesizer.
Oh, so that's why he was hanging with Roman. I was wondering what the deal was.
Yeah, and that's why because the software editor is called Babu Freak, which is the character in the movie who lives on the planet Kajimi in the new Star Wars movie. So it's kind of all connected, but little
And
geek trivia.
what is the form of synthesis? It's just an analog, or is it?
It's a fully, completely analog synthesizer, polyphonic, and it has this entire modulation matrix where you can basically just push a series of buttons to add modulation to any point at both negative and positive values. It's incredible. If we could pull up a picture of it, you should take a look at it because it's a
I'm
beautiful.
definitely going to look it up after this chat, and I think
It's a beautiful synth. You should definitely look it up. It's funny because I've really been kind of uninspired by monophonic synths just recently. I've been just craving for polyphony to just be able to play chords. And the one synth that I've kind of been lusting over this entire year that I haven't been able to get to yet is that Udo Super 6. Have you seen that thing?
I just was looking at that. What is it that
Yeah.
you like about it?
Well, it's kind of a hybrid digital analog synthesizer, but
Right.
just the way that the entire signal routing was laid out from all of the video demos that I had saw was incredibly intuitive and kind of clicked to me as something that I really liked. It's got this binaural stereo audio effect as well, where you get this really wide stereo field out of it, and it's got this binaural panning effect to it that sounds like a pretty cool tool to use. I don't know if it's going to end up becoming something that's novel, but it sounds fun to me.
Is it a pricey synth, or what's the price
Yeah,
point on it?
it's about 3 grand. Um,
Could be worse.
yeah, I just found out that my buddy Joff Farr, who runs this company called GSF Agency, I heard that he's distributing it, so I might be sending an email to see if I can snaggle a lender for a while to make sure I like it before I drop the cash on it.
And what DAW do you like to use?
I just recently switched over to Bitwig this year, and I'm using
Wow,
Bitwig 100%.
people are loving it, huh?
Dude, it's really inspiring. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It is almost nearly identical to Ableton.
Wow.
I think a lot of people are really turned off by having to learn a completely new DAW.
Yeah.
But the thing that I loved about it was that the learning curve or switching from Ableton to Bitwig was next to nothing. The only difference between the both of them is aesthetics and maybe like in Ableton, your browser to find your plugins and samples are on the left, but in Bitwig, it's on the right. Or in the mixing faders is on the right side in Ableton, it's on the left side in Bitwig. So it's kind of like just learning how to drive a car in the UK or something like that. You know what I mean? But it's basically got built inside of Bitwig. It's got its own modular synth environment called Grid, which
Yeah.
works similar to like Reactor, where you can kind of build your own instruments inside of the DAW natively inside of it. And then if you have a sound card that has DC coupled outs, it spits out CV and gates from your computer to all your external gear too. So it integrates with all your modular equipment seamlessly straight up into Bitwig. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's great. And if you're having fun with it, I've had a few other people I've been speaking to over the course of these interviews also are enjoying it too. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
look, I can even pop up this session here. You can see it.
Oh, nice.
I mean, it's a little colorful. We got a little bit of a rainbow here, but I'll show you. Like, I don't
High
want to get
tech.
too nerdy for too long, but in Bitwig, if I open up their grid environment, um, just opening up any patch, you get this full kind of modular world.
Wow.
And
That looks fun.
yeah, you can kind of build and develop your own synths,
It looks
which
like the Nord modular sort of too.
yeah, it kind of has that Nord modular G2 kind of GUI interface to it.
So then if you get that thing built up and you go into some form of record mode, it does it obviously it will remember the automation of some of the tweaks you would do on that, I can imagine.
Absolutely. And then you can see
Oh wow.
if you're familiar with Ableton, like if I just close this modular window, it's just like Ableton. You have your entire tracking window here, except your browser is on this side instead of the other, and your mixer
Yeah.
is on this side. And then you have your clip launching window that's just like Ableton.
Wow,
These
that is.
and
What is
the one thing that I like is that you can on this arrangement window, you can even open up your clips on the same window as your
Oh,
arrangements.
look at that.
Jump back and forth between those as
Well,
well.
that's a plus there, isn't it?
Yeah, man, it's
And
fun.
then how is the sound quality to your ear as compared to Ableton?
Oh, actually, incredibly good because I think for me, where Ableton sound quality begins to degrade is when you start really using their algorithm for
Yes,
stretching samples and stuff. And
totally.
one of the things that's really powerful about Bitwig is that you have several different you have several different algorithms to stretch samples in different ways. So you get a much I'm trying to find out where it is, sorry. But you get a much more different types of ways of stretching samples in different sound qualities. So you can do a really high quality one, or it really just handles samples in a lot better ways. So I think that for me, the sound quality has been much better. It's kind of a convoluted way to explain it, but you know,
Is is that taking you away from your actual hardware modular?
I would have to say it has a little bit. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've been going through phases, man. For a
Yeah.
long period, I was so sick of software, and all I wanted to do was just buy hardware gear all the time and just play with
Right.
hardware. And I've found myself specifically this year through this pandemic actually getting much more into computers and plugins more, and also not even necessarily just computers only, but also exploring software editors for my hardware sense. Like I have a Nord Rack 3 here by my side, and then like finding a software editor to design patches not on the hardware but designing patches on my computer. It's been quite a bit of fun to do that.
What about external drum boxes? Are you a fan of sampling drum boxes, electrons, or
Yeah,
MPCs, or
I got my rhythm here, which I don't use very much, but the one drum synth that I've been using more than anything in the world is Nord Drum 3. Have you seen this?
you and Richie Devine both like that, right?
Yeah.
That's one of your is that one of your trade secrets?
It I think it's probably one of the most versatile and good sounding, powerful quality hardware drum synths that I've used in a long time. And I'll just show you over here.
Oh, it has hardware. It has a software editor as well. Then
This is the software editor for it that was designed in Max MSP. So, I mean, it has drum pads on it, like an electronic drum machine, but I don't ever even touch it. It just sits in the corner of my room.
oh, nice.
It sits in the corner of my room in this drawer, and I basically push the drawer in, and I don't even touch it. I just do all of my sound design and everything completely on this whole software interface. So I design all my drums on this thing, and I mean, the kick drums and the amount of bass and low end that comes out of the thing is incredible. It just rattles my windows.
Does that have effects in it too, or is it just a?
It's got a delay and it's got a reverb, and I'm not even going to say that they're the best reverb or delay that's
Yeah.
available out there, but it is useful in certain times. I mean, I have a DSI Tempest as well that I really like. I have my TR-808 in the back, and um, a handful of different drum machines, but they don't get utilized as much as my Nord drum does. That's for sure.
Man, that's an endorsement right there. I got to
I
go with
know.
it. So
Fucking
there's no
Nord,
going.
send me some checks.
So there's no going back to the Quasi MIDI 309 then.
Oh shit, yeah, man. I missed that thing. That was my first one.
Mine broke. I
Really?
have it and have it. I plugged it in, well, maybe a year ago, and it doesn't even turn on. I'm like, okay, I guess you don't want to play anymore.
It's been so long since I've used it. I don't even really recall what it sounds like anymore.
I don't remember it being all that great. but it was kind of fun to play. I don't know why. It was just kind of like, it was different. It kind of had a different sound, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think like it ever made it on an album. Mine though.
Hmm. Yeah, recently I've kind of been had my eyes on a Nord G2, kind of to get back to the Nord modular realm. I've kind of had my eyes on that, except that I can't. I'm waiting for them to update the software editor to work with my Mac OS because I don't have a computer that's old enough to run their software currently. And back in the days, I remember the 90s, I owned one of those Yamaha FS1R racks, those FM modular synth, and now they're worth so much money. And I remember must have took it for granted back in the days, and I've been kind of interested in picking one of those up again.
It was crazy. The other day I was looking at the Junkie XL sale, and he had a couple things in there that, I had. I'm like, God, is he charging that much for that? And I went and looked online, the Emu SP1200.
Oh yeah.
It's like they're going for like $8,000 now. Did you know that?
That's
I have mine downstairs. It hasn't been used in a while. So I said, shit, I could go buy some new gear because I don't think I'm ever going to use the SP1200 again.
Yeah, it's time for me to clear out a bunch of stuff too. Recently, I sold some old effects processors. I sold my DP4 finally, and I've been wanting to offload a bunch of modules and get rid of some stuff so I can maybe buy something new to be inspiring. But I haven't actually bought that much new gear recently, probably from the lack of material benefits because of the fact that I have no work or a job during this whole pandemic. But we'll get back on the feet eventually, man.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to get past this period, and then hopefully I'll be looking at your Facebook page with all of those crazy journeys that you're going to do.
Man, to be frankly honest with you, I don't even think that I could go back to touring like that again.
It's tough, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's especially now being a father and having a kid at home, and now he's at an age where he actually realizes that I'm gone. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to go back to doing it that hard like I was for a while. But I never say never. You never know what's going to happen, I guess.
Well, maybe not as much, but maybe you'll still go to all those exciting places.
Yeah, hopefully, man. I mean, it's always a gift and a blessing to be able to go places and have those types of experiences. It's easy to take that shit for granted when you're doing it, and I see my friends now who tour heavily, not during this pandemic, but in general, like say it's like, oh my God, I've been on the road. I'm so tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I need a break. And it's like, dude, live it up because the shit doesn't last forever, Fucking enjoy it.
How do you feel about doing online performances during this?
I've had mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know. I always have this natural inclination to be against doing something that everybody's doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you change your perspective on it a little bit and you actually feel like you're providing people with something to do when people have nothing to do, and there could be some sort of inspiration that you can give someone through doing it, then I don't see it as a bad thing. I've done 4 this year, which isn't as much as most people, but I've enjoyed every single one of them. I've heard a lot of my colleagues and people who are in the same field as me and doing the techno thing be like, oh, I don't like it because, it's the crowd that gives me the energy that inspires me to do what I do. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I get that. But at the same time, being isolated in a room and playing music and live streaming, it also gives you the opportunity to go in places musically that maybe you would never do in front of a large crowd because you'd be afraid of of how they would receive it. It kind of opens up a whole new door of possibilities. So, yeah, I've done a few and I've enjoyed it, but at times, I'm not going to lie, there's been this kind of feeling of like, oh my God, it's just getting old. Everybody and their mothers are doing this, but that's just the snob in me sometimes that needs to snap back to reality and realize that it's actually a good thing, man. It's a good thing.
I think it does give people good inspiration to see that, we can somehow find a way to do something for everybody, during this time. I think we'll always remember this year as being the year of whatever this is,
Yeah.
And then we'll look back and be like, well, we made the best of it for that or this or whatever. But we just got to keep going, keep our heads up. But
That's an incredibly good point, man. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just doing the best with what's given to
yeah,
us in our environment. And I don't know, things like this, even this chat and just having a talk and giving people the opportunity to into it. Um, I know that as artists, sometimes it's hard to see the value in it, but as a music lover and a consumer, it means the world to a lot of people, and it's a good thing to give to your community and give back in any
I
way.
get a lot out of it too, though, man. Like, I mean, I love chatting with you today and getting inspired by some of the gear you were talking about. I immediately go into study mode on what you're talking about, and I super appreciate it, Mo.
Yeah, dude,
You're
me too.
you're a quality dude,
Thank
and
you,
I've
man.
always loved chatting with you. It's funny. I think I first met you. We were in line for a Paul Kaiju or a Mutant Vinyl Hardcore lottery at
That's right. It was
Decon.
Comic Con, yeah, or it was
Yeah,
Decon,
yeah,
Decon, yeah.
yeah. It was. I don't know. It's got to be 5 years ago now, or 5 or 6 years, maybe. I don't
Probably
know.
more, yeah. I don't
Time
know.
is flying. It's so fast, man.
Yeah, it's
Don't
always
believe
been
it.
great
I think
to share that common hobby with you with collecting toys, man.
was that 2014?
I believe it
Yeah,
was.
it was 2014, man. I know. It just seems like yesterday. And yeah, you also collect the kaiju, huh?
I do, man. I mean, I've been a toy collector my entire life. I think
Wow.
in the last 10 years, I've definitely jumped on the kind of Safubi designer toy and kaiju world. Always in search of the most rarest and crazy shit that I can find. But man, I've been collecting comic books and toys since I was a kid, and I've never let go of most of everything. So it's just accumulating in boxes.
Are you collecting the vintage stuff, or are you collecting mostly new, mostly new school stuff?
Mostly new school when it comes to Safubi and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I haven't had the pockets or the means. I mean, I've been to a couple toy festivals in Japan where I've gone and saw vintage stuff and wanted to get it, but I
yeah.
haven't jumped into that
That's a
world.
dangerous door.
Yeah, dude, I haven't opened that door yet. But I do collect a lot of US based 80s toy lines, like
Oh
old
wow.
Hasbro stuff and Silver Hawks and just like weird stuff on card from the 80s that sits in my catalogs as well. So just a variety of different stuff.
I always find it interesting what people collect. When when I went to Japan with Paul Kaiju a couple times, there's nothing more fun than watching him shop for his vintage stuff because he'll literally scream if he finds something. Be like, ah! And everyone's turning around. In Japan, you don't really hear a lot of screams, but
Well, I mean, you know what? Honestly, I'll be honest with you. 95% of everything that I do in Tokyo is shopping toys for toys. I mean, when I go out there for 2 weeks after I play a gig, I've got my list of all my stores. I hit Mandarake. I end up going to Nakano Broadway to go to my toy store. I hit up all my spots and do all my things. I try to line it up with whatever festivals are going on while I'm there. And I end up having to buy another suitcase to come home to ship most of my stuff back with.
man, we're two peas out of the same pod. We should compare lists.
Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man. I've had to settle down a bit with the collecting. Luckily, when I find when you make a toy, I made a toy, and then when you make a toy, it helps you to settle down a bit on the collecting. Well, I did go for a crazy few years, getting at the basis of like what you call your collection, and then you kind of simmer. You're like, okay, I've been that guy in Mandarake knows my name by now. It's like, okay,
That's incredible, man. I mean, when I saw that you were making your own shit, that was incredibly inspiring to me because, I mean, obviously toy collecting has always been my hobby and it's like collecting music is a hobby, but then you become a music producer and it's a different world. And then seeing you take that step into actually producing something was like, holy shit, man, you're making like dreams come true.
it's
And
fun. It's what's cool about it is the scene is just like the music scene, only it's different people doing with a different. When you go to those like that line that we were waiting at, everyone was just talking about toys. Nobody gave a shit that about music or anything. Nobody gave a shit about Skinny Puppy or whatever. They were like, "What? You're in line for Mutant Vinyl Hardcore or Paul Kaiju?"
yeah, totally, man. That's
I got I got a new toy coming. This is the new design for it.
holy shit. That's awesome.
He's based on my cat Fisherman,
Oh
and
yeah,
they
I've
yeah,
seen pictures of them.
he's like a he's like kind of a nice size one this time, a little
Well,
bigger.
when you have your lottery for those, man, you gotta let me know. I want to get in
I
on
will,
it.
I will. Yeah, but it hasn't gone to mold making yet. It's such a long procedure. After you make the sculpture, it takes like half a year for it to get into the to the for them even to accept it to go into the wax mode and then to
Oh.
get the molds made in Japan. It takes so long.
Are you what's his name from who Grody Shogun, or is he the one who's doing the manufacturing stuff?
No, Shirahama, Dennis Shirahama.
Okay.
Shirahama toy. He has a few toys himself. That the spider, little spider,
Yeah.
and the cat. He's got a two-headed cat, but he's a sweetheart. He's an expat that lives over there in Chiba, and he became like one of the master sofubi pullers. So and with his own factory. So he he and I hit it off as friends, and then he invited me to get my toy made there. So that was just that was a blessing because his whole specialty is the marbling, like mixing colors and marbling
Yeah.
the vinyl, which is so unique to him.
Yeah.
A lot of guys do it, but his always turn out like
Quite nice.
quite unique.
Did you ever get to go to the factory and watch your stuff get pulled?
Not yet. I'm hoping. He says in the future when that schedule. I can't wait to go to Japan. Like you, man. It's like like our flight got canceled, so we have a credit. They wouldn't give us back
No money.
the flight. So I know we still got a flight booked there, and we're going to go there and do an anniversary party for Barsai. But when that will be, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, of course. Well, geez, man.
Yeah, but I can't wait until we get the chance to meet up there, man.
Yeah, I'd
We'll
love
go,
to, man.
we'll go out and toy shop and eat some good food.
I'd be honored to, man. That seriously would be a dream come true for me.
Moe, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us and opening your world of Drumcell.
Dude,
Uh, to those people who would like to go out and investigate more about Moe, Bandcamp /Drumcell.
yeah, you can find my Hypoxia and my drum cell material there. If you guys want to check out Belief Defect, Belief Defect has its own Bandcamp. So if you go to bandcamp.com/Belief Defect, you'll find tons of merchandise and material there. I mean, that stuff's more of our kind of abrasive, distorted, noisy kind of more project. So you can find that material there. But between Drum Cell and the Belief Defect Bandcamp, you can find all my music.
Yeah, if you haven't heard it, folks, go and check it out. It's some quality stuff. And once again, Moe, thank you so much.
Dude,
Patreon people, thank you for tuning in, and your support is always appreciated. Thanks again, and best wishes for the Christmas season, Moe.
thank you. My birthday's on Christmas Day. So
Oh wow, what a great thing! Happy birthday on your thing, and hopefully your son will have a great day with you on that day, and you guys can rejoice. So let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate you inviting me, man, dude. It's an honor and a pleasure. Your music has inspired me in ways that I don't even have words to tell you, man. So to be able to sit here and chat with you means the world to me, man. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Anytime, man. We'll see you